In many ways, this is also a vindication for President Trump, that Fani Willis is dishonest. She doesn't want to follow the law. She has contempt for the rule of law. Let's go to the big news, and good news for the rule of law for a change, which is a massive victory by Judicial Watch against Fani Willis in Fulton County, Georgia, for documents or document lawsuit to get hold of her communications with the Pelosi gang and the Biden gang at the DOJ, specifically Jack Smith. And here's my quick explainer video from the other day. We've got the records coming within basically minutes here at Judicial Watch.
Hey everyone, you see the big news. Fani Willis has to turn over to Judicial Watch correspondence between her office, and the Pelosi January 6th committee, the Jack Smith operation over at the Biden Justice Department. Judicial Watch sued for these records, and Willis couldn't even be bothered to show up in court and properly respond. The court found her to be in default, ordered her to do a diligent search and turn over the correspondence to us by Monday, after finding her in default. So Judicial Watch's heavy lifting once again gets results as we seek to further expose and confirm the collusion and improper political abuse of power and lawfare targeting President Trump.
So, we sued for these documents, I think it was back in March. And we had asked for the documents. They told us there were no documents showing communications between Fani Willis and the Justice Department and the Pelosi Congress. And then Congress says, oh no, there's at least one letter we got. And Nathan Wade, Fani's boyfriend, was regularly visiting the Justice Department by all accounts. So how could there be no documents? So we sued. And rather than respond, as you're supposed to do when you're sued, they didn't respond in court. And when you don't do that, as a litigant, you could be found in default, which is exactly what happened. It's extraordinary. I've never seen it before in our FOIA litigation in the 25 years, certainly the entire 30 years of Judicial Watch. We don't have anything comparable. Sometimes the government misses a deadline and we say they should be in default. No judge has ever agreed with that, and always gives the government a second bite at the apple and, lets them, get past the deadline with no punishment, or violate the deadline with no punishment. In this case, that was offered repeatedly to Fani Willis's people, and they still couldn't respond or didn't respond. So here's the court order. On August 22nd, 2023, Plaintiff Judicial Watch submitted an open records request to Fani Willis seeking, quote, all documents and communications sent to, received from, or relating to Special Counsel Jack Smith, and all documents and communications sent to or received from the United States House January 6th committee. Plaintiff subsequently brought this action on March 5th, 2024, alleging the defendant violated the Open Records Act there in Georgia. Because defendant, in fact, does have responsive documents that should have been produced. And then we want the records and attorney's fees for having to go to court to get the law enforced here. And so the court then explains that it's undisputed that they got served and they didn't respond. So I don't want to get the back and forth on that because it's complicated, and the point is we were right and they were wrong. They didn't respond, and they had plenty of opportunity to respond in time. And so, in fact, when you're in default, the court still lets you come back and say, Your Honor, we screwed up. Get us out of default so we can just litigate this normally. And most courts say, okay. They never did that. But let's get to the juice here. The court finds defendant is in default and has been since April 11th, 2024, which is the due date. They had to respond. As already mentioned, it's undisputed that the defendant was served on March 11th, 2024, a month earlier, so they had 30 days to respond. While it is true that let me go back to nothing in the court's order basically asking Judicial Watch to clarify whether it served the complaint meant they didn't get the complaint served. They were pretending that because the judge asked the question, they didn't have to answer, even though they admitted they had gotten served with the complaint. So there was a mix-up at the court, but they knew better. Really, really awful, awful situation. So the court then goes on and explains how there are all sorts of ways that Fani Willis's team could have fixed the issue. And they didn't. They didn't. She never moved to open default on any basis, not even during the period where she could have opened default as a matter of right. She never paid costs, and she never offered up a meritorious defense. Plaintiff is thus entitled to judgment by default as if every item and paragraph of the complaint were supported by proper and sufficient evidence. Here, this means plaintiff, Judicial Watch, has established that the defendant violated the ORA by failing to either turn over responsive documents, records, or else notify plaintiff of her decision to withhold some or all records. So we effectively get the judge to declare, and he does, that Willis violated the Open Records Act, search for the records, turn over the records, give Judicial Watch attorney's fees, etc. By finding defendant in default, the court has in effect declared that she has violated the Open Records Act. The court also hereby orders defendant, Fani Willis, to conduct a diligent search of her records for responsive materials within 5 business days of the entry of this order. Within that same 5-day period, defendant is ordered to provide plaintiff with copies of all responsive records that are not legally exempted or accepted from disclosure. And so she needs to give us the records or explain why not. But this is the kicker. The court expects that such production will include the correspondence identified by plaintiff in its complaint. So the way I interpret this order is, look, there are going to be records you're going to withhold. I expect the records you withhold do not include the correspondence. So that's a pretty big deal in terms of the court ordering her to respond. And he wants an explanation if they, quote, don't find any such correspondence. Literally. It is further ordered to provide an explanation why such correspondence does not exist in defendant's records or why it is being withheld. So the writing's on the wall, right? Turn over the records. You've got 5 days. And those 5 days run on Monday. So Monday, it's now the 6th. Monday is the deadline. Now, Judicial Watch attorneys deposed a top aide for Fani Willis yesterday. And it was about 2.5 hours, but even after that testimony, they were unclear, or we are unclear, as to whether they're going to give us any documents, or whether they're going to produce any documents, or what they're going to say. So that was 2.5 hours of not getting an explanation, it sounded like to me. But, this is an issue that Congress has been pursuing. They've re-asked for documents that Judicial Watch is likely to get. or have disclosed in part. And frankly, even if they don't give us the documents, they're going to have to say there are documents, but we don't want to give them. At least that's what I think the law would require. Big victory. And as I said, we've been doing this type of work for 30 plus years at Judicial Watch, and never before has a government official gone into default in such an egregious way here and be found in default by a court in what is essentially a simple open records lawsuit. And it kind of shows you where Fani Willis's competencies are or where her corruption is, right? What did I say in the I want to read my quote because I had a good quote. Fani Willis is something else. We've been doing this work for 30 years, and this is the first time in our experience a government official has been found in default for not showing up in court to answer an open records lawsuit. Judicial Watch looks forward to getting any documents from the Fani Willis operation about collusion with the Biden administration and Nancy Pelosi's Congress on this unprecedented and compromised get Trump prosecution. So in many ways, this is also a vindication for President Trump. That Fani Willis is dishonest. She doesn't want to follow the law. She has contempt for the rule of law. Now, Trump's cases are now before the appellate court in D.C. over the other corruption Fani Willis was involved in with her boyfriend and her paramour being hired, and making it look like the whole prosecution for Trump was designed to line their respective pockets and fund their romantic relationship and trips. But Trump has also asserted this immunity defense to protect himself as well, so the case may be killed that way. But don't you want to know about any collusion between Jack Smith and Nancy Pelosi and Fani Willis? I do. And of course they know that's what we're asking for. And Wade goes up to the White House, there are no documents. They send a letter to Congress about collusion, basically the January 6th committee, and we ask for the documents, and they say, well, we don't have any, even though Congress says, well, what about this letter? So it got a lot of attention, news all over the world, all over the country. Let's go see some of those headlines. The Hill, Daily Mail, ABC News, Fox News, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Associated Press, all the big news networks covered it, or media covered it. And it shows you that, as I said in the video, the heavy lifting gets results. You've got to be consistent. You've got to be strong. You've got to know what we're doing. What you're doing in court. I mean, we've got such a great team of lawyers. Paul Orfanides leads our legal division. Russ Nobile was the lawyer or senior attorney in this case for Judicial Watch. We've been assisted. I would be remiss in not mentioning the excellent work of John Monroe of the John Monroe Law Firm in Georgia. So, we sometimes need help when we go into states where our lawyers aren't admitted to practice law. We have to work with local counsel. And that teamwork is essential. And of course, this victory is because of you, dear supporters. I mean, this isn't free. It costs money to pay lawyers, to pay the rent, and to pursue this investigation. They wanted to make us, it took us almost a year to get this result. And the reason they're able to get away with secrecy is because people don't have the capacity and resources to sue, or even the patience to wait around. And we are patient. We're not so patient that we won't go to court when the law allows us to, if we had the capacity. But we're not going to go away. I mean, one of the funny things that often happens here at Judicial Watch is that there'll be a FOIA request or an open records request outstanding, and let's say it's like 3 or 4, some ridiculous amount of time, and the government will come back to us and say, "Oh, we have this FOIA request from 3 years ago. Do you still want?" We say, like, "Yes." We don't even let them finish answering the question before we say, "Yes, we still want the documents." Because in my experience, and in Judicial Watch's experience, all scandals, no matter how old, are always fresh. I don't know, there's probably a better way of saying that, but I think you get my point. A scandal from 4 years ago, you never know when it's going to be relevant again. For example, the government has been stalling forever and a day in the release of text messages between Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, those FBI agents who were texting each other. They had an office romance, to put it charitably, and they were texting anti-Trump messaging and pro-Hillary Clinton messaging, and really further compromising what it already obviously was a compromised, corrupted investigation of President Trump. And it's been 4 or 5 years of fighting for those text messages. Now, before November, we're just trying to get the darn documents we're due under law. But now all of a sudden they're a bit more important, right? Because Trump's coming back in, there's going to be potential reform at the FBI, and their conduct is going to be central to understanding the corruption that went on at that agency. So, whether it be Fani Willis, Jack Smith, Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, Barack Obama, dare I say it, Hillary Clinton, we're just not going to go away. And once we begin an investigation, and sometimes we don't get much further than the lawsuit, and we don't get the documents, and that's the end, and there's not much else we can do other than bemoan the fact we didn't get documents. But we try to pursue them as long as we're able. And in this case, we just refused to go away. They told us they didn't have documents. And rather than just saying, "Oh, well, I guess they don't have documents," we sued. And Fani Willis suffered a massive defeat in court. Very unusual, unprecedented even defeat in court. Thanks to Judicial Watch's heavy lifting. Again, assisted by you, dear supporters. So let's see what they give us. One of the reasons I get outraged all the time is because I'm thinking we're going to get everything we should get under law, and then they pull a fast one. So I'm prepared for the fast one from Fani. But I don't think the court's going to suffer it. But we'll see. We'll see. So be sure to tune in next week where I'll have an update as to what happened. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.